Hey, Sterile Processing Universe, it's Hank Balch here from Beyond Clean, and we are here. Thanks for hanging with us. I know we're a couple minutes late going live on this fantastic conversation about the future of CEs. Thank you for hanging with us. And if you're joining us live or if you're tuning in after the fact, we love to know who's watching, who's joining in. Tell us in the comment section below where you're tuning in from, what your job role is in sterile processing or outside of sterile processing. And this event in particular is going to be really interactive. We got some audience polls to get your insight on CE content and education. And of course, we got a great panel discussion set up for you today. So without further ado, let me bring on some of our panelists. But before that, I want to make you wait one more moment. I do want to give a shout out to this event sponsor, Censis Technologies. Thank you for your support of this critical conversation around continuing education, not just education in general, but specifically this ongoing education that keeps us up to date as an industry. And I don't want to say too much more because we're going to define what CE content is as we get this panel kicked off. But let me bring in some of our fantastic guests here. And as I do, I'll let each of you introduce yourself here. Angus, would you kick us off? Tell us who you are and what your role is.
Sure. My name is Angus Bruce. I am the director for sterile processing at Anne Arundel Medical Center in Annapolis, Maryland. I've been in the field for about 25 plus years.
Awesome. Let's go next to Ken.
Hi, Hank. My name is Ken Batten. I am a manager of sterile processing at Penn State Health Hershey Medical Center in Hershey, Pennsylvania, and I'm currently acting educator. I've been in sterile processing now for about 6 years.
Awesome. Thank you, Ken. And let's go next to Michelle.
Hi, Hank, and everybody. My name is Michelle Sirex. I am the surgical services educator specialist right now for Overlake Medical Center in Bellevue, Washington, and I have been in the field for about 22 years.
Awesome. Welcome, Michelle. And Kelly.
Thank you. I'm Kelly Swales. I am the Director of Clinical Services at Censis Technologies. I've been in the field almost 20 years, started my career as a scrub tech. So as I always tell the OR, I've been in your shoes. Now I'm in sterile processing side. So kind of can take in everyone's perspective of everything.
Awesome. Well, as the audience can see, we've got some all-stars on this panel with a lot of great background and experience in sterile processing. And I just want to kick us off, to lay the foundation on what is continuing education, what is CEs. I think I already defined it. If we're talking CEs, we are talking continuing education, but what does that mean? And in particular, why is it necessary or required in our industry? And anybody can kind of kick us off and take a whack at that.
Sure, I could take a step at this. So we're in a constant flux of change. Things are changing every day. Education is important because with those changes, you gotta stay up to date. We can be doing something today, and then tomorrow you come in, oh, it's changed. And what I've seen is a lot of people are coming through CS. CS is like one of those revolving doors. It's a launching pad for a lot of people who, they start out in CS and they go right up to the OR. They become nurses, they become scrub techs, and they go into other fields. But they, it's that constant evolving change, staff flowing in and out. So with that, you have a lot of education that come in and you have a lot of education that goes. So you always got to be constantly staying up with that.
Yeah, that's a great point about the education that's leaving, because we spent a lot of time investing in these folks in our department, which we're going to talk about some more later on in the panel, but then they go. And when they go, they take a lot of that education with them, which means there's a constant need to continue to put more education back into that team, especially for those new folks, as you mentioned.
Absolutely.
So anybody else want to weigh in? Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah.
So I've now lived in 2 different states working sterile processing that actually requires continuing education. I started in New York. There they required 10 CE credits a year. Here in Pennsylvania, we just recently passed the House Bill 81. It's a big win for Pennsylvania. That's requiring certification within 18 months. And it also has a bullet point in there talking about that continuing education is required 10 credit hours every year for anybody who falls under Section 301. So continuing education now is starting to pop up to be a requirement in a lot of places, and that's even for people who are grandfathered in.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a
I'd
great
like to
point
chime in
about
on
that state. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So I was going to continue and go on with that as well. He just mentioned some of the states are now mandating continuing education. You have some states that are actually mandating certification, which I think is a good thing. And I think it should be the path that we're heading towards. Back in the day, 20 years ago, SPD was a lot like dishwashing, so to speak. You know what I mean? They were kind of looked at it that way. We just kind of whizzed it in, banged it out. But with these more technologies that are coming down the pike and these advanced technologies, there are so many different intricate ways that all of these things have to be processed now. It's not an option anymore. It's you have to have that foundation to be able to do your job now.
Absolutely.
That's a great point. And that
And
connection.
add to that too, so you
Go
think
ahead.
about if you get certified, so you get your certification, but you need to maintain those CEs and keep up on that knowledge and that information. Because as we've said, things are changing. And as things change, or as people that know these things leave, that's one thing, but yet being certified is one thing, having your CEs is another, because you have to understand that, FDA, CDC, AMY, ARN, all the other acronyms out there, they're always changing, updating standards.
Mhm.
And what a great way to learn of those changes and those edited standards is by the continuing education.
And to add to that, exactly what she's saying is you have to not only, wait for your department or your leader to get you that information. You need to be involved with, AMY, ISHM, and all of our different governing boards, and actually participate in those free meetings that you can listen in on, so that you hear about, different updates that are coming down the pike, like ST91 that's going to be coming in the fall and stuff next year. Then you can prepare yourself and get yourself ready, and arm yourself with that knowledge ahead of time versus playing catch up and maybe having something bite you in the butt later.
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly right. Well, and I'll add into what Kelly said, and we've kind of danced around this a little bit, but I do want to be very specific in how we're defining. There is general education that is continuing, that could fall in this continuing education category, and then there is that technical definition of continuing education that's always tied to a certificate or credential. And that's kind of what Kelly was alluding to, is in this space, when we have certifications, and in fact, like I know in the past there were options. Instead of getting CEs, you would just sit and recertify. So you would take that certification test again, for the reasons of ensuring that you're up to date with those industry standards and guidelines. Or if you don't want to sit and take the whole test again, that 10, 12, 100 hours, whatever the standard is, depending on what your credential is, and you can take those throughout the year or years and ensure that you are up to date with the AMY guideline updates, as you mentioned, and the various FDA, CDC guidelines, that come out. All of that stuff is constantly changing. But the reason that it's important on the technical side, again, is because in order for those credentials and certifications to be accredited, that's part of that accreditation process, or that's part of that approval process, to ensure that those letters actually mean something. So that's a great point. Let's kick it off here. And I want to bring in some of our audience insight here. As I mentioned, we're going to have a number of polls throughout this conversation. So as we do that here, okay, boom, had a little fun there. All right. That's the first question here for the audience, and I'm going to ask this to the panelists too. What is your favorite way to consume sterile processing CE content? Not, later on in the discussion, we're going to talk about all the new ways and all the different ways out there, but I'm kind of just curious with folks who are tuning in and watching this, what's your favorite way to consume, or what's your favorite type of CE content to consume that's out there today? please put your answer in the comment section below. And let me throw this over maybe to Ken first. What's your favorite type of CE content, Ken, to consume?
I think this actually changes a lot for me. I know one of my favorite things to do with CE is think about where my career is currently going, what I'm doing at any particular time, and I try and focus on that aspect. I remember one of my first CEs that I did when I first started. I actually utilized Censis University, and they had a CE that talks about how a sterilizer works on the service side. You know, it explains your steam traps, your steam lines, the jacket, the chamber. You know, that one CE that I did, I learned so much about a sterilizer because I was actively learning about sterilizers at the time. I was learning how they worked, why we did what we did. So one of the things that I like to look at is where I'm at right now and what can benefit me going forward. You know, I know that there is a wealth of knowledge out there, so I can find what I need to find. So that's kind of what I'm looking for is what am I needing out of this career field right now?
Okay, that's great insight. Anybody else want to add into that?
Sure. Go ahead. Go ahead,
No,
Michelle.
you go ahead.
You sure?
Go ahead. Yep.
So for myself, you know, I consume information different ways: paper, podcasts, just listening to stuff while I'm working, doing multitask because my brain is just wired that way. I would tell you, I took advantage when we were down during COVID to listening to some educational programs through Duke University. And a lot of it was on team building and how to bring teams back from being down for such a long period of time. And I found that for me that was essential, considering that we would have to get back up off the ground. The teams are going to be fractured for being down for so long. So for me, I found those types of educational very important. Not to knock the Censis University and the other companies out there. I listen to all of their educational, continuing educational programs. But I think as leaders, we also need to also look at outside of those businesses or institutions for other education on how to be better leaders and how to motivate teams and one of the things that I think the team really need is a strong leader that can pull everyone together and get everyone pulling in the same direction.
Michelle, you had something to add?
Well, for me, I agree with everything that has been said. But for me as well, I think for me, it depends on what exactly I'm trying to learn. So I really appreciate hands-on in-person in services when it's something technical that I'm going to have to actually figure out. I'm not going to learn that as well as watching it on a podcast or something like that. But I'm also a community bus driver. And so every day, Beyond Clean, I'm going to pitch you here. I listen to, podcast or something like that on my walk to the bus stop, on my ride home from the bus, so I like to get it in convenient ways while I'm on the run, because just like everybody else, we're multitasking. We've got 900 different fires in the furnace at the same time. But when it's something that I've got to do and learn, like it's a technical skill for me, I prefer a hands-on, somebody showing me the teach one or watch one, learn one, teach one type of method. But these CEUs and all these virtual things that have come out since COVID have been amazing. Far different than what 20 years ago, where you'd have to wait for a rep to come in, and maybe once every 6 months you'd get some type of in-service unless you went and you found it on your own. And publications too, like he said, University of Duke and just different medical things. I like to educate myself. Google is my friend. I ask a question and then I'll research different things. Networking with people. How would you solve this on LinkedIn, Facebook, on our different sterile processing groups? I get it a combination of ways, and then I, figure out IFUs and best practices and try to tailor it from there.
Yeah, that's a great point, Michelle. It's funny you brought up Google. Ken was Googling right before we came on the stream to help us out a little bit. And I can tell you that is one of the most Googled terms in our space is sterile processing, continuing education. Like that is a go-to for Google for folks. I'm not surprised
Usually
that
last minute.
came up. Yeah, like midnight before they're due.
Yep.
And yeah, that's part of the whole conversation around your favorite way to consume, because there are uh, that will depend obviously on how much time do you have and can you schedule that live CE to your point, in person, or do you need this already prepackaged so that you can consume it right away? So that's great insight. Let me go back to kind of this definition type phase, actually, and let me turn this off here. And it's the question of what comes to mind when we hear the term CE approved education? And I really want you to speak from that perspective of the front lines in sterile processing. When you hear this term, when your technicians hear this term, what's the first thing that comes to mind when they're like, oh, this is CE approved education?
Hank, if I can speak to that.
Sure.
So when I first, hear you say that question, the first thing I think is like, oh, good, I'm going to learn something new. We don't know what we don't know. So what a great opportunity to learn something new, learn of a change, learn of some new standards, learn of a new product that's out there, is just utilizing what's available to us and attending those webinars, reading that article, anything to broaden our knowledge and just to learn. So when I see something that's CE approved, I'm more likely to read it or attend because I need to get all my credits for my certification. So that's a big eye catcher for me, and I'm always happy to see that if I'm going to take the time to do something.
Yeah, that's a great point.
I
Definitely
have
double value. Go ahead, King. Yeah, sorry.
I have a 2 bullet point on that. When I first started 6 years ago, when I heard CE approved, I thought it was going to be boring.
Okay.
I
got some truth there.
You had, in the last 5 or 6 years, we've had an explosion of different CEs that have been out there. But, when I went in, there was like, you had 3 or 4 basic companies that did everything. And you couldn't reuse them unless they updated. Everything was CE approved. And, the technology wasn't, it was there, but it wasn't being utilized like it could. But going into now, when I hear CE approved, it kind of piggybacks off of what was just said. When, people have an idea, they actually went through the process of talking with ISHM, CBSPD, or somebody to get this approved so you can use it as an hour. So this is probably going to be something worth my while. So in the last 5 or 6 years, it has drastically changed. But I do remember that when I first started, I saw CE approved, and I was like, man, this is going to be boring. It's going to be a PowerPoint with the monotone voice going, same thing for 30 minutes to 45 minutes. So.
All right. Yeah. Thank you for that truth bomb there, Ken. And like, I'll be honest, I felt the same way when I was in the industry in 2009 as a brand new technician. I'm thinking like, here we go. CE means PowerPoint. Yeah. And I agree that has definitely shifted, and we'll kind of bring that up here in a bit too. Let's go ahead and jump on here to another question. And this kind of, it's a great segue from what Ken just said. If we don't want boring to be the definition of our CE content that we're consuming or that we're creating, what is the opposite of that, in your opinion? What makes a great CE experience?
I would say one that engages the audience, because it tells if they're picking up what the CE is trying to really get across. I could tell you that I have in-services and with my staff on a regular basis, and you'll see it like the blank stare. So I will pull out a story or something that I've experienced to get them going to see if they really picking up what we're trying to convey to them, and it works. And so that's why I would say it has to be engaging. You have multiple people from different age groups, different backgrounds, from all over the world doing sterile process. So we have to figure out the audience and try to tailor the message to them to get them engaged.
That's a great point.
I would add to that and say that it should be fun too. You know, I like to make the ones that we have in our department fun, to have some way to make you laugh or some way to sink it in. I try to find funny sayings and things to kind of like sink it home, rhymes, songs, dumb things like that. It makes it fun, it makes it entertaining, and then it also like drives the point home too. It finds a second way to kind of like sink that in.
Awesome.
Definitely.
Yeah, I like the idea of fun. And I've been at a presentation where they kind of turned it into more like a game show, and that kept everybody really engaged, and that was a lot of fun. The other thing I think is important is to keep it into simple terms. You know, keep it in layman's terms. Yeah. I was at a conference one time, and there was a presentation, and it was so technical, and so you could just watch the whole audience just kind of shut down and start doing things on their phone, because it was above and beyond and outside of, like, no one knew what they were talking about. So I think it's just really important to know your audience, make sure that you're addressing them, and then have that interaction, that engagement.
Yeah, kind of piggybacking too, for what I said earlier, you know, people are scrounging last minute a lot of the time to get these CEs. And a good CE education experience is, you know, making them want to come back for more, not last minute. You know, make them see that learning these throughout the year or throughout the 5 years, whichever one you are, paying attention to what is going on currently in your field and not waiting until the last minute. Get them intrigued, get them in, and make them want to come back for more. That's a big thing that I think CEs need going forward.
Even engaging the staff to where they have extra questions to where they go even further, you know, and dig even further with where you leave it, because they're so engaged, they want to find out more. So they actually go on and seek, what does Hank and Beyond Clean have to say about this? Or, you know, what does Escalap say? Or what are, you know, the big, you know, vendors saying about this? And it drives conversations too with other people in the networking as well.
Definitely.
Well, it's a perfect time to include our audience, keep this fun and engaging for the folks who are tuning in. So it's time for another audience poll. Okay, so for this audience poll, we're going to be talking about the preferred length of CE content. This is a topic that I don't think anyone has quite referenced yet, you know, but it's obviously, it's the elephant in the room, maybe, because if you're going to do CE content, it's going to take time. And the question is, how much time do you prefer? And I got a couple options here. So if you're watching this live or later, you know, just put your answer in the comment section, A, B, C, D, or E. And A is 15 minutes, which I might add is just long enough to fit into a typical shift huddle or maybe a staff meeting without being too crazy. And you got B for 30 minutes. You got C for an hour, which is this CE piece of content, plus another hour to get us that 2 CEs, and we'll talk about that here a little bit later. D, multi-session events. So those are like the conference that you see through Beyond Clean, the virtual conferences, regional conferences we do. Those are live conference settings. Or E, something completely different. So really curious to know what the audience thinks, and I'm curious to know what our panel thinks. So does anyone want to kind of kick us off here and tell us what you prefer in terms of CE content length?
I can start out. I like my preference is a multi-session event. I feel I learn better when it's in person because of the fact if I'm on a webinar, if I'm reading something, you know, we get interrupted. So I don't care if you shut your office door and say, do not interrupt in a meeting, somebody will still knock on the door. So I feel when you're at a conference, it's kind of everything's turned off, no one can interrupt you, and you're there and your full attention. Aside from that, then would be the 60 minutes. That it's, you know, if I'm going to kind of put on my calendar and have time, you know, not a problem, because I can definitely find 60 minutes here or there, whether that be working from home or just kind of shutting everything down and really saying, do not disturb.
Okay, great. Who else has some insight here?
I personally like I as well enjoy the conferences. I feel like I learn more, and I feel like they're more tailored to have, a group topic to talk about, and it staggers into, different stages of that conversation to solidify and go real deep. But I also really like the 30-minute sessions, or where you can do a quick breakout session with your group in the department and have a quick group setting where everybody has a quick 20-30 minute in service. So I like to see both of those, but in person is definitely where I think everybody retains the best, when they have that hands-on and the actual presence, versus when you can tune it out, or you get somebody knocking on the door, or the phone rings, or and never ends with a webinar. I always get distracted, and I have to pause and rewind, and that 1 hour ends up taking me 2 or 3 to get through if I want to actually get the content.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I wonder, that kind of interruption aspect of CE content, especially in the department, which I've got a question here later that I want to specifically dive into that department setting, CE delivery. But the assumption is kind of, if you consume any kind of CE programming, that it needs to be consumed from start to finish in one setting, and then you're done.
Mhm.
And that's really challenging if you think about the real life setting of a sterile processing department, which how often do you ever get a chance to sit down for even like 30 minutes uninterrupted? Like, how many staff meetings have you ever had where the phone does not ring, or where someone is not coming to the door, or the sterilizer buzzer doesn't go off? Like, that does not happen. So there is no such thing as an uninterrupted chunk of time. And because of that, how are we at all, as an industry, changing the way that we create CE content that can be consumed in smaller chunks, even if it's a part of a larger, piece of CE? Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
Well, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Michelle.
I was going to say something that, the time fragment thing has been a big issue here where I'm at, and something that was developed before I came here and has been a real success, and I'm carrying it on. We call it Skills Day, and we actually schedule it on a Saturday, where we don't have, we have minimal surgeries going on, and we have different people, Belamed, Steris, those different reps come in, and we have in-service stations in decontam, prep pack, assembly, case carts, and we have them rotate through the stations, and they get all their education. We serve lunch, we do some games, we do some raffles, and that's been a real big hit as far as being able to get our staff to get their CEUs, to get the training that they need on the machines and the different stuff in the department. Especially like our annual competencies that we have to hit on every year because they're big target things. That's been a real success, and they actually enjoy coming in on that Saturday and doing it, believe it or not, which is really cool.
So Hank, for me, we schedule in services 2 Wednesdays out of the month, and Wednesdays for us, everybody's here because you have people that are off on the weekends and stuff like that. So Wednesdays seem to be ideal for us, and I personally kind of walk through and I pick on the ones that don't answer or try to hide in the back. But I also do, when I do my walkthroughs, as the leader in the department, you got to do walkthroughs. They call it the Gemba. You walk through, you question them, but you don't question them in a way where, it's intimidating. You question them in a way where you're trying to help them to develop and explain and show them how that in-service that they just received benefits them. And you get them engaged and talking back with you, because sometimes you can pick up on gaps if you just talk to them. And when you find those gaps, then you have to go and bridge those gaps. And if there's one person with a gap, there's multiple people with gaps.
That's a great point. And I really appreciate the back and forth of that education piece, because it's not like the educator or the leader is kind of Moses, coming down from the mountain
Right.
with his piece of education, and this is all it is. It's a conversation between, hey, what's happening on the front line,
Mhm.
and where are those gaps, so that then we together can collaborate around education that's going to be most beneficial, for you, for the department, for everyone. So that's a tremendous insight. Let's move on to another topic here. I think we've answered this one kind of here and there, but I want to give y'all an opportunity, especially for those of y'all who've been in the industry for a while, to talk about some of the primary ways that sterile processing folks have consumed content. And I want to be real basic again, because we've got some folks that are tuning in who are brand new to the industry and they may not know. What is that kind of traditional model of, if you needed CEs, how would you get them?
If I can.
Sure.
One big thing that we do here, our educator in the past, our managers here, they keep track of a lot of our in-services. Some new people might not understand that the Isham, CVSPD, these companies do recognize in-services and stuff from the hospital as CEs. And on that note, some managers and educators might not know that too. That your in-services that you're doing with your staff can count. Sometimes you do have to contact a company and get a number and show that it is CE approved, but you can just utilize your department in-services. That's a big way that a lot of people don't know.
Yeah.
Awesome. That's a great point. And you're right. A lot of people don't know that.
And before the wonderful world of the internet podcast, that was how, most of us got. I remember when I got certified years and years ago, that's how I got my points every year. And I'd hassle my boss, like, when are we going to have an in-service? Like, I need at least one a month because I got to have my 12 CEUs for the year. Like, we need an in-service.
That's a good point.
In the past, it was
Or you
always
get the vendors to come in. They'll come in too.
Yep,
Call them up and be like, hey, we need some CEUs.
I was just going to say, yeah, you're led on your vendors to come in and do educational events with the staff, or then you could read an article, answer questions, and mail it in. So we've come a long ways, and yay.
Right.
Yeah, definitely.
So Michelle kind of alluded to something, and it's a great opportunity to do another audience poll. Okay, great. So for this audience poll, we're actually going to be asking who's responsible, or who should be responsible for organizing and storing continuing education for technicians. And this is a hot button topic. For some folks, like, it may be common sense. For other folks, we'll kind of decide that as a panel, maybe. So curious for everyone tuning in and for the panel. We can also add organizing or supplying is maybe like another better word, I guess, because organizing is in the question. So let's say in terms of supplying CE content to your technicians, is that a responsibility of a department manager or an educator? Is that part of your job description?
Can I chime in as an educator? I mean, I do the courtesy for my staff. Any in-services that happen in the department, I keep track of, and I keep track of attendance. So if they ask me to run what they've done, I have a list for them. But to be quite honest, if we're all adults, you're certified, you should be keeping track of your stuff. Because what's one? To me, I think we should all be responsible for our own things. But I will definitely help and get those things together and show them how to do those things. But do I feel like that's my job or my responsibility? Not necessarily. Providing and getting that education to you and that information to you, I think, is more about keeping track of what you've gotten.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, so I
Go ahead, Kelly.
I think the number one thing is that everyone should be responsible for their own. because I don't want to rely on someone else to be storing my CE information and then they lose it, or I stop working there, something happens. Years ago, when I started as a manager in a new department, when employees came in and had said, "Oh, can I see my file? I need to see how many CEs I have." And I kind of questioned, like, what? And I learned that she was storing all her CE certifications in her employee file in the office. And I said, "You don't have a copy of these at home?" And she said, "No." She said, "I just store everything here." And I said, I said, "I would never do that." I said, and I go, "I'll tell you right now, you're welcome to, but I will not take on that responsibility, because you never know when something gets misplaced, something happens." And I said, "You don't want to retake something." And then along with that, I do feel that if it's a requirement at your facility, if it's a requirement for your state, I do feel that the facility should take on some of that to provide that for staff. Part of that being so then we can cover this while we're all here at work, versus having staff having to take off time to go attend a conference or stay at home and attend a webinar that's live, knowing that they'll get interrupted at work. I just kind of, I think it's all overall benefit for everyone if you do offer some of that at work. And then along with that, it can be then specific to what is needed in your department. So for example, I go do clinical assessments all over the US, Canada, Puerto Rico, and then I create training plans with that. So then that training is specific to what is needed, and you can earn CE credits for that. So it's, you really want that geared to what's needed.
So what do you think, Angus? You had something to say, I think, earlier about this.
You know what? I think this is a shared responsibility in a way.
Yeah.
As adults, you know, we are responsible for paying our own bills. If you're in sterile processing and this is your profession, it is also your responsibility to maintain your CEUs as well. But as far as providing the education, I want to make sure that my staff are fully knowledgeable and they know how to do the job. You walk away, the supervisor walks away, the manager walks away, anybody comes in and asks them, "Hey, tell me what you do." I want them to be confident in explaining what they do and why they do it. So I think it's a shared responsibility. Others may think differently, but I think, you know, I just want to make sure I have the most knowledgeable staff. And I don't want them to be in a situation where they're like deer in a headlight, you know? So my opinion, I think it's a shared responsibility. Now, I've had plenty of my staff have come to me at the end of the year. "Hey, I need my CEUs." I said, "Okay, did you attend?" Well, if you attend, you would have signed a sign-in sheet. If you didn't sign the sheet, sorry. Here are the resources that you can go now and now listen or, you know, take part or take a test. That changed their mind, because the following year they came back to the in-services. A shared responsibility. Like I said, it's a shared responsibility. If you want to progress in the field, you need to also step up and take part in those educational services that are being provided, but also seek out education elsewhere as well.
Absolutely.
I'll add, I'm almost 100% certain that this came out of the Detroit Medical big quality headline, you know, that happened a couple of years ago in sterile processing with the major quality defects and issues. And this was in the CMS report that they pulled all of the in-service documentation. And what they found was kind of similar to what Angus was just talking about, is a small percentage of the staff had actually signed in that they attended these things. And what it gave them was this long documentation trail of kind of poorly attended in-services for years and years through the department. And I could see, especially like third shift, had not been getting the same education access that, you know, first and second shift had, for instance. And so it really told the surveyors, you know, there's a major issue or problem going on in just the education provision in this department outside of any process or quality challenges. And again, like we always like to say, that is not a Detroit medical problem. That is an industry-wide problem, because I can almost guarantee you, if we looked at documentation from folks' departments tuning into this panel, we're going to find some of those holes and gaps that you've presented in services. Some of your staff have attended, but some may have been out. It may have not been scheduled that day. What is your process for following up with those folks to make sure that you've got 100% compliance on those that are provided, to make sure that your team's doing it the right way and that it's documented? Huge opportunity, huge risk there. Ken, I didn't know if you had something else to add as the educator on this panel too.
I'm torn on that one, because I wholeheartedly believe that it is individual's responsibility. For years I've had what I call an I Love Me book. It's everything that I do, my education, my certifications, my C's, anything that I have, I keep in a book or a folder somewhere. But I also think that in a manager role or an educator role, you may not have the responsibility, but you almost have the duty that you need to make sure that your staff have the education, because they reflect you as a leader. You should do your best to make sure that you are reflected into them and that they reflect you. It should be a two-way mirror. They should operate as you would operate. Now, obviously, we do have outliers when that does happen, but I'm torn between both of those, honestly, because I've always done it myself. But here recently, I've started to see a team that takes care of each other. So I'm torn right now on that answer. I can't give a 100% either way.
This honestly goes back to a conversation that we recently had for the Mission Control conference that aired last weekend as of this live stream. And it was discussing collaboration between sterile processing, infection prevention, and OR. And the topic came up of how do we as sterile processing users proactively help to educate our IP resources on what's going on in our space? What are the updated guidelines, et cetera? Well, to your point, Ken, I think there's a place for no matter whose responsibility it is, for the whole team supporting their educator on keeping an eye on what is available out there in the space in terms of CE content. Because an educator is just one person. Like typically, you're really lucky if you got one educator, and you're very rarely going to have more than one in one department. So like that one person has got a lot of other responsibilities besides just CE content. But if you got 30, 40, 50 other technicians keeping track and a pulse on what's coming out in the industry, new podcasts, new webinars, new conferences, new white papers, all of that, and then bringing it back to that educator and saying, hey, did you see this? We'd love to talk about this, or it'd be awesome if you could feature this, or maybe some other folks are not aware of this. Like, man, that just seems like that'd be a great resource for an educator.
Absolutely. And on that too, like you said, the educator is one person. They don't have eyes everywhere. I can distinctly remember when I first moved to Pennsylvania in 2018, I met Justin at a Isham chapter meeting, and he kept saying, Beyond Clean, Beyond Clean, Beyond Clean. And I'd never heard of this organization before. Never heard of it. And I was like, what is it? And, he kind of explained to me what it was and how new you guys were. I mean, you guys were probably, 6 months old at that time? Like you guys.
Yeah, we were babies. Yeah.
And, they're talking about it, joking, because this is new. There's never been a podcast for sterile processing, at least not a big one like that. Mm-hmm. And I remember driving home that night. I found it on Spotify, I think it was, and I was just listening on the way home, and it's been ever since there. But, word of mouth is how things happen. For everybody listening, if you have something you want to see, tell your manager, tell your educator, because they have a lot on their plate. They might not be thinking about that at the time, but you throw that little worm in their ear and you might be having an in-service that quicker than you think.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
And Hank, to add to his point, that is why it's very key that as leaders in the department, we do those round-ins and we talk to the staff, because that is how we get those little worms in the ear and help us better plan and develop for the staff.
Right.
And watching, even when because you have some staff who don't really want to talk or vocalize or do any of that information, give any of that information. So I just kind of sit back and I watch from a distance and kind of see, and then I'll ask, why do we do that? What's the reason for that? And then I can identify gaps at that point. And if you sit back and watch too, just a lot of times just watching, you can identify and see a lot of those gaps that way. For sure.
Definitely.
And so we got about 15 minutes left, and I want to spend the majority of that time talking about the future. Before we segue, though, I just want to kind of right off of Ken's point. Back in 2017, when Beyond Clean launched, there was only one weekly sterile processing podcast. Now there's a ton of podcasts out there, including Censis has a brand new podcast. I don't know, Kelly, do you want to spend a couple of moments just kind of tell us about that, just in case folks haven't heard of it?
Yeah, you can always find information. Censis.com. There's links there to CEs. There's podcasts, there's blogs, all kinds of information out there.
Awesome. All right. So as we kick in here, Michelle, you're just talking about gaps. Mm-hmm. And I want to throw out this question for the panel. What are the major gaps or even maybe the minor gaps that you see out there regarding the types of content topics or offerings, or maybe what's like how they're being delivered today? Is there anything that really jumps out at you for anyone?
I have a point on this, Hank. Something that I'm starting to see, we are seeing more and more individuals going off on their own, making new podcasts themselves, new videos. I follow a bunch of people on LinkedIn, Facebook. One minor gap that I can kind of notice going on is that they're not looking at sterile processing as a whole. They're kind of showing their way. They're, this is how I do it. This is how this is this is this. But they need to remember that, when you're doing a CE, this is for everybody across the world at this point. You post something on Facebook, LinkedIn, anything, anybody, anywhere can see this at this point. So you could have somebody in the UK, India. I mean, you post with Beyond Clean every once in a while, welcome to the new users in some country, over in East Asia, all the time. So if you're saying, I inspect an instrument this way, that's great, but that might not be the only way. There might be so many other ways. So the one gap I'm seeing with a lot of CE education coming forward is just making sure that it's all encompassing, making sure that you can touch base with everybody, not just one individual.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
It's properly vetted too, like you said, with people just making their own videos.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's very important that when you're presenting something, whether it's a podcast, it's a webinar, it's in-person conference, is that you have your references, that you reference, per Amy ST79 1.2.3 or something, this is where I got this, and kind of bring that into that conversation so they understand it's not just, like you said, your way of doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And, and I think with the delivery nowadays, I think all the webinars are great. I truly missed in-person conferences. I can, I'm in Minnesota, so we have our Minnesota chapter of ISHM and APIC and McCarm and all that, and I miss all those conferences and not going to them. So hopefully we'll get past this pandemic soon, so we can get back to that. But with the a lot of the webinars, I think one of the biggest challenges as far as that delivery, and I'm guilty of this, and we talked about this a little bit, is that those interruptions. And so one thing I feel is that, like now, how you're asking questions and you're taking those polls, I think we need that. I think a lot of your conferences should have that interaction, so that way it's keeping everyone engaged and it's not just somebody logging in and then walking away.
Right.
I'm sorry on that.
Give you ammunition too to say, note on your door that I'm attending a conference that's interactive. I cannot be interrupted. Mm-hmm. I'll be done at 2 p.m., 4 p.m., whatever. And so then they know when they can come back and find you.
Hank, I know you've met Nestor Hernandez before.
Right. Yep.
He actually spoke at a conference that our local ISHM chapter had, and I remember He was talking about team building and everything going on. He literally had us do the Congo line in the middle of Censis. And there's videos out there, but I don't know where they're at right now, but in the middle of our chapter conference, there's probably 50 of us in the Congo line dancing, having it up, and he's just going nuts. So yeah, interruption, getting involved. That's a big thing, and that's
get the blood moving, make it fun.
Yeah. And I think that's a gap too. You know, with the increase that we're seeing with all the virtual conferences and the social media and everything going out there, you have to have that in person still. You have to be able to, you know, look to the person next to you who you may not know and be like, I don't like what he's saying. And they're like, well, what he's saying, you know, having that individual thing, you know, not being a keyboard warrior, like actually being there and, you know, seeing how everybody else is reacting. You know, if you all of a sudden react to something and nobody else does, maybe that's something that clicked. And that's good for the presenter too, because you can actually see how your audience is reacting. So, you know, that's a gap that, you know, with the future going to a lot of more virtual, you're going to see a bigger gap of not being able to have that in person back to back, like face to face. Sorry.
What I'm afraid of with the gap, as far as gaps with these virtual things, is what we've talked about before. And I think you did a like a 5-minute read article, Hank, about you know, we listen to it, but we're not really listening to it. So how much are we really taking with us? And how much are we really consuming that we're going to be able to take out and have fully digested and be able to be confident in our stuff? That's one of the things that I'm a little leery about with all of these things, because I'm guilty of it myself, where, you know, I will be distracted for 5 minutes and I won't rewind that 5 minutes, and that could have been 5 minutes of something critical that I missed. Right.
And that's it kind of goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyways. The most important part of consuming CEs is not getting the CE certificate. It's not recertifying. It's the doing of the things that you learned. And if you're not doing the things you learned, then you're wasting your time and you're wasting the educator's time. You're wasting everyone's time. It's about doing it. So yes, it's important to deliver it, to make it engaging, to make it fun. But if you're not going home and doing it, what are you doing?
For what? What did you do it for?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So let's talk about the future here. You know, think big, think creative. How can we get better as an industry, smarter, more creative about how we are presenting this type of engaging, fun, personalized education that we've been talking to this entire panel? Like, what are some takeaway points here that you throw out, even if it's not like the full strategy? You know, like, what do you want these manufacturers and educators out there who may be tuning in to say, hey, maybe I can do something with that and I can take that idea and really make it into something fresh?
I would say use the technology available.
Yep, I was going to just say the same thing. Like, maybe, you know, we have virtual reality, different things they had. How cool would it be to have like a virtual reality in service where you actually had to like do all the things or something like that? Like, utilizing the technology we have. If we can't be together, we've got to be 6 feet apart. Let's find a creative way where we can get that hands-on and that didactic learning versus just a webinar.
Awesome.
Right. Think of your talk shows nowadays. You'll see a virtual audience. So it's you see everybody, you know, all that little on all the screens. And maybe that's what we need to see on our webinars. Is, you know, part of that when you sign up is have your camera on, have your camera ready. And then you can do that, maybe not a conga line, but we could do some stretches or some, you know, clapping our hands or something.
Yeah.
Keep them engaged and make it exciting, make it fun.
Definitely.
Awesome. What about you, Ken? Anything else you want to add to that piece?
You know, we have a lot of old timers in our departments. They've been here for a while. They can see a lot of how this department's grown. But just in 5 years since I've been here, the technology aspect of our job, the social media aspect, everything has grown, and it's going to continue to grow. As long as we take advantage of that, I truly think that our CE education is going to be just skyrocketing. You're going to see virtual reality someday. You're going to see more hands-on. You're going to see companies realizing that sterile processing is a thing, you know, not just the people downstairs. You know, the OR, like you had talking about working with infection prevention. I've worked with infection prevention before, and they've asked me questions. I've asked them questions, and just, you know, Google, learning the technology, learning everything that's going on, is continue to use that and going forward. And I think our education process is going to be tremendous going forward.
Awesome.
I agree, and I think collaborating with our stakeholders, you know, OR and infection control, and attending their in services, and attending our in services, so you can see how all those pieces fit together and why it's not just a job, or, oh, I've always done it this way. There's a reason behind the madness, and I think when people understand the logic behind the madness, it sinks in more, and you have, no, I've got to do it this way because of this. Yeah. This directly impacts this. And then you're more likely to do the right thing, I think.
And I would like to see more of, you know, so I've been to the ISHM conferences. I've been to different local chapters of, you know, ARM and APIC. And so one of the things I think is sometimes you can be like, you're just preaching to the choir. Yep. I think we need to mix it up a little bit. I think we need to see more sterile processing at ARM. We need to see more infection prevention at sterile processing. Yes. So that we can then take it from their perspective. We can see where they're coming from, but yet they can understand the challenges and why it's so important to pre-clean, and why it's so important to look at your chemical integrators when you open up your container. I mean, all these different things, and they understand the whole fundamentals of behind the scene. And then I think maybe that will also help kind of bring that gap together between OR and SPD, or infection prevention. And you know, what a great way to do this is just to maybe more interaction.
If nothing, we get some collaboration, right?
Yeah. So maybe we need a conference that's all just a collaboration of
collaborative learning. I love it. Yep. That's where we get the best results, is when everybody gets a piece of the pie, and, oh, now I understand why that affects you, and oh, I get why you can't do that now.
That's why it takes 2.5 hours to turn over an instrument.
Right. Exactly. What do you mean you can't just throw it in and cook it? What are you talking about? 3 hours.
So we've got just a couple moments left. I want to do a final audience poll. It's kind of a hot potato, and then get y'all's feedback, and then we'll call it a wrap today. And then I will share the link to the CE quiz. Go get your CE certificate, and to read the other CE article on continuing education in our industry. But before that, let's do a quick poll. Okay. And this poll, as I said, kind of hot potato. Are paid CEs going the way of the dinosaur? If you think back again to the early days, at least my career, you know, that 2008, 2009 time frame, a lot of our CE options, again, were paid. You were going to paid conferences. You were buying study guides online, you know, that are CE approved. If you fast forward to 2021 and following, man, there is so many free CE options in the space. Curious to the audience to know, what's your opinion? Are you paying for CEs this day? You know, like these days or not? And then for the panel, do you have any insights on, you know, whether or not? Ken, go ahead.
If there was ever an asteroid that was going to take out the dinosaur of paid CEs, it's Beyond Clean. I'm just saying, how many CEs total are we up to?
Yeah, so right above your head here is a QR code that if you scan it, 250 free CEs at the Beyond Clean Credit Hub. Yeah.
Wow.
Free.
Yeah, so good point about the asteroid.
That's amazing. and thank you.
And that's the thing. I mean, I can honestly tell you that since I've been in sterile processing, I've never paid a single dollar, unless it's a conference, for CEs.
Same.
I Beyond Clean, all the websites that are on, I will 100% say paid CEs are going out the window, unless it's a paid conference. But at that point, you're not paying for the CEs. You're paying for the networking. You're paying for the meals that they might be having. You're paying for all the free goodies
expos and all those things.
Yeah, you know, so that's what you're paying for. And that point, you got, you know, that's something you have to do, you know. But I think paid CEs they're out the window.
Okay. Does anyone disagree?
Back in the day, I held my certified surgical technologist certification, and it was because you had to pay for CEs, and then you had to pay to be a member. It was cheaper for me to retake the test every 5 years than it was to pay for all my CEs and pay for the membership.
This is my first year in 15 years of being certified. I go through CBSBD, so I do the 5 years, but this is the first time I've actually sent in my CEUs versus just taking the test again because, I was terrible at keeping track of all of my things. Like I tell people, somebody, and same thing like we were talking about, somebody didn't keep track. I learned the hard way. And so this is the first time that I actually have my CEUs and I can actually turn it in and I'm not having to pay that test and all the fees and everything that you would do before.
Well, with that, I think this is the perfect wrap up here to thank y'all for providing another free CE through Beyond Clean into the industry. Oh, that's right, 2 CEs. And, this is a great point, too, because it goes into the collaboration. Beyond Clean does not create any CE by ourselves in isolation from anybody else. We're constantly bringing in new voices and perspectives and companies and partners to drive CEs deeper into the industry. So everything that you see in the library, the revolution of CEs that has happened over the past couple of years through podcasting, all of that is done with that unique collaborative spirit, even that Kelly mentioned earlier. So I want to thank each and every one of you for being on the panel. I know Angus had to jump. And I want to thank everyone tuning in for hanging with us for the length of this conversation. Thank you so much for your time today. Keep pushing the needle on continuing education. Keep getting creative out there. And as we said earlier, keep consuming, but more importantly, keep doing the things that you're learning through CE content. And until we meet again, keep fighting dirty.
Thank you.
Thank you.